It is beyond dispute that the church in America is under attack today. The examples you just witnessed allow you to see that with your own eyes. But let me share with you some additional examples of how the church in America is still under attack, and how those attacks have only intensified and increased over the last several years. One such case involves a church in Yuma, Arizona. The church's name is El Centro Familiar. This church had purchased a building, an abandoned building in the downtown city of Yuma, in the Old Town District, and it applied for permission to use the facility as a church. The city denied the church's application for zoning permission to locate in the building that the church itself owned and to have its church services there. The city did this because it said that the church did not fit with its overall theme of recreation, and that the church, in fact, would blight this area of the city. Amazingly, the city's actions required the church to locate its facility outside of the city limits, away from its target population, and also to carry a mortgage on the building that it owned inside the city that the city would not allow it to use. As a result, the church stood to lose not only the building that it had purchased and where it felt God had called it to locate, but also many of the members who couldn't afford to make the trip to the outside of the city limits in order to worship at this church facility. Zoning codes continue to be a problem for churches across the country as municipalities continue to push churches to the outer limits of cities and counties. In another case, churches and pastors in El Paso, Texas, were threatened with jail time and arrest for simply circulating a petition to recall city council members who had voted in favor of a domestic partnership benefits package for same-sex couples, based upon a little-known Texas election code provision that prohibits churches from distributing recall petitions. This election law is blatantly unconstitutional, but election codes have been used over and over against churches and church members to silence churches, to drive them out of the political process, and to intimidate the voice of the church into silence on the issues of our day. In California, school officials at a private Lutheran school faced a lawsuit after they decided to suspend 2 female students who had announced on their social networking sites that they were engaged in a lesbian relationship with each other. That relationship violated the school's official code of conduct for its students, which the students were given in advance of admission. These students were claiming that the school had no right to hold the students in the school to a biblical standard of conduct. Lawsuits like this pose a great risk to Christian schools and to churches who have church schools all across the nation. And finally, let me share with you the most blatant and aggressive attack on freedom of conscience that our country has ever seen. Here I'm talking about the Obamacare HHS mandate that mandates religious employers to provide contraceptive and abortifacient coverage in their health insurance policies. Make no mistake about it, this is a direct frontal attack on freedom of conscience. Some have attempted to portray this mandate as only affecting the Catholic Church teaching against contraception, but it is much more significant than that. This Obamacare mandate affects every Christian who has a belief against abortion. And the administration knew that when it passed the mandate. Let me read to you a quote from Kathleen Sebelius, the head of Health and Human Services, who passed this mandate. She said this: "The public health case for making sure insurance covers contraception is clear, but we also recognize that many religious organizations have deeply held beliefs opposing the use of birth control." The administration knew of this conflict when it passed this mandate. Now, how did they resolve this conflict? Let me read to you another quote from January 20th of 2012, again from Ms. Sebelius. She says this: "Nonprofit employers who, based on their religious beliefs, do not currently provide contraceptive coverage in their insurance plan will be provided an additional year until August 1st, 2013 to comply with the new law." She went on to say, "This additional year will allow these organizations more time and flexibility to adapt to this new rule." Did you catch that? The administration's answer to the clear conflict posed by this mandate is that it just gives an additional year for religious employers to comply with this mandate, as if religious beliefs can somehow be changed or molded to fit whatever political philosophy happens to be in power at the time. Instead of acknowledging that religious beliefs form the core of who we are as individuals. As Alan Sears, the President and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, reminds us, if the federal government can succeed in forcing people to violate their faith, It will have the power to force anyone to do anything. That is what is at stake in this battle to protect freedom of conscience. To that end, Alliance Defending Freedom has filed several lawsuits against the Obamacare mandate on behalf of religious employers and religious colleges across the country who do not want to be compelled to participate in ending innocent human life. Shockingly, the most recent lawsuit is on behalf of a publisher of Bibles who the administration says is not religious enough to fall within a religious exemption to the mandate. If that's not religious enough, I don't know what is. The battle against the HHS mandate continues and is only intensifying, and it is one of the most important battles in protecting freedom of conscience that we as Christians face today. So in conclusion, unfortunately, we don't have time to share with you all of the attacks against churches in America. But the examples that you've just seen illustrate the fact that they do exist, and that the forces bent on silencing and intimidating the church are only intensifying their efforts. Do not be lulled into a false sense of security that only because your church or your pastor or your congregation have not been subject to these attacks that somehow they don't exist. In fact, they do exist, and they are real, and your brothers and sisters in Christ have been thrust headlong into the battle all across our country. These examples that we've shared should motivate us to action. They should engage us to get us off the sidelines and to vote our conscience, to elect governmental leaders who respect the freedom of conscience. If we stand together united as Christians, we can ensure that our constitutional freedoms are protected, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. Thank you for your time. God bless you, and God bless America.